Hello and welcome to our Minds and Money 5 at 5 show, which this week is sponsored by Ceylon Graphite, Nouveau Monde Graphite, and is brought to you in association with the Resource Global Network. My name is Andrew Thake from Minds and Money. For those of you attending 5 at 5 for the first time, the aim of 5 at 5, 5 guests at 5 p.m, is to maintain engagement between investors and miners through a lively, interactive format whilst we wait the return of physical events. A few admin announcements before we start. To make the session as interactive as possible, please have your video switched on. To ask a question, you have two options. You'll see a chat function, which is in the bottom of the screen, and you can type a question there or type your thoughts and comments there. And myself, my co-host, Kelvin Johnson from Minds and Money, will look to pick up those questions throughout the course of the hour in order that we can go and ask our esteemed guests the questions. Or even better, you can also wave your virtual hand under the invite participants function. Either Kelvin or I will unmute you. And at that stage, we can then go and allow you to ask your question live. We'll also be having polling questions throughout the webinar where you can go and vote. Being towards the end of the week, I said we encourage you to bring along a glass of wine or beer to relax, sit back and enjoy. For this week's show, we have a battery metals themed focus, and to discuss this, we have a great lineup of guests. They are Thore Sekkenes, Program Director of EBA 250, the European Battery Alliance, Eric Desaulniers, President and CEO of Nouveau Monde Graphite, Bharat, Parashar, Chairman and Chief Executive of Ceylon Graphite, Jay Roberge, Partner of Tehama Capital Corp, and Matt Fernley, Head of Research at Westbeck Capital Management. So to start things rolling, I'd like to pose the first question to Matt. Matt, as well as working at Westbeck, you're also Managing Director of Battery Metal Review. Can you tell us a little bit about your outlook for battery materials in 2021?
Sure, Andrew. Well, first of all, I can tell you it's pretty positive. I can see two key issues or two key thematics, if you will, in the market at the moment. First of all, that the market is underestimating EV sales. And secondly, that the market is overestimating the raw material supply response. So starting off with EV sales, I think that the sell side is underestimating sales growth quite considerably. And of course, that's got huge implications for batteries demand. So we sold just over 3 million plug-in electric vehicles in 2020. Global EV penetration was about 6.8% in December. Many sell-side houses are actually only forecasting 8% EV penetration by 2025. So they're way too low in terms of their forecast. Just to give you an idea, I'm forecasting 14 million EV sales in 2025 and 33 million in 2030. Now, why is that important? Because obviously how many EVs you sell determines how many batteries you're using and how much battery materials are needed to manufacture those batteries. So the sell side is potentially understating battery materials demand by as much as 70% in some cases. Now, if I understate EV demand, that's not really an issue because it only takes me probably 12, 14 months to build an EV factory. It takes me maybe 18 months to build a battery gigafactory. But a greenfield raw materials project, we're talking of the average of 3 to 5 years. So the sell side is being much too conservative on EV sales. And as a result, they're massively understating battery materials demand forecasts. Now, that wouldn't be so much of an issue if it wasn't for the fact that over the last 3 years, we've had falling prices and we've seen a massive drop in investment in battery material supply. So just to put some numbers to that, in the 3 years to December 2020, just under $80 billion was raised or allocated for new capacity in electric vehicles, around $50 billion for battery supply, but only just under $10 billion for the whole of the battery materials space. Things obviously started to ramp up in January, the beginning of February, in terms of capital raisings. But I can tell you in January, 15 times more capital was raised in EVs than was raised in raw material supply. And given what I said earlier about the time it takes to build capacity, I think you can see the big emerging problem there. And finally, I just want to emphasize that the sell side is laboring under a bit of a misapprehension in terms of the nature of battery material supply. Much of the sell side sees battery materials as a commodity, and this is absolutely wrong. let me make it absolutely clear that battery materials are a specialty material. When we talk about battery materials, we're talking about products with what we call 3 nines or 4 nines purity levels. That's 99.9% or 99.99% purity. Individual deposits have to be qualified by potential buyers, whether that's the OEM or the battery manufacturer or the cathode or the anode maker. And that can take up to 2 years. Anyone in the industry will tell you it's not the absolute purity level that's key, it's about the consistency of the impurities in your product. So qualification is an ongoing process throughout the life of the mine. Now, what does that mean? I think there's an assumption on the cell side that one battery materials project is fungible with another, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So cathode or anode makers may spread their exposure between 2 to 3 projects, but if one goes down, they'll have to significantly recalibrate their process to substitute another supplier. And that has big, big implications for the supply of raw materials. So only certain deposits are suitable to make battery materials. And it may be a surprise to listeners that probably up to 40% of the brine that comes out of Latin America is not actually battery grade. It's not suitable for making batteries, yet you'll find 100% of that brine in most cell side supply models. And that's the sort of thing that we're dealing with here, a lack of understanding, a clear lack of understanding of the space. So the key issues for me is that demand is being underestimated and supply is being massively overestimated. And, you know, we've had a few of them, but that's perfect ingredients in my view for a super cycle in battery materials.
And just one quick sort of like follow up to that, Matt. Obviously, we've got 2 graphite projects presenting later on in today's show. What does that specifically mean for graphite?
Well, I mean, it's very positive for graphite. You know, there's a number of cathode chemistries in the industry, but at the end of the day, all lithium ion anodes made out of graphite to one extent or another. So, you know, we are talking pretty substantial demand for graphite in the battery material space. Now, a lot of people talk about potential silicon substitution, but I don't really see it as an impact apart from around the margins of graphite demand. So I think, you know, this is still it's a very positive thematic for the graphite space.
Thank you very much for that. Bringing in Thore Sekkenes, perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about the European Battery Alliance, because maybe not all our viewers are familiar with what the European Battery Alliance does. And then I guess the follow-up question to that is a little bit about your outlook within this space for 2021.
For sure. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this event. I really appreciate that. I think before I go into what European Battery Alliance is, I'd like to say, Matt, you said everything I wanted to say, but you did it much better than I was going to say it. I totally agree with your prediction. Totally. Possibly you're being a little bit diplomatic. That's my only remark.
That would be the first time somebody said that about me.
Yeah, but I'll get back to what European Battery Alliance in just 30 seconds. But just to pick up on what you said, Matt, we spend in my little group, we spend a lot of time looking at predictions on where this is going on EVs, but not only EVs, also on installations in the power sector, big batteries in the grid, so to say. And one thing is the EV market, but there are other markets that are today perhaps 10-20% of the battery uptake, and those are even more underestimated. So I can only underline what you just said, Matt. Thank you. Now, European Battery Alliance. We're a small group. We live inside a company named Inno Energy, and we have the easiest way of putting it is we have a mandate from the European Commission to drive a European battery industry. That's our responsibility, is to stand on the barricade and promote that Europe gets a thriving battery industry. Back in 2017, we had virtually nothing. Some very, very exotic battery manufacturers, but nothing in comparison to what is made elsewhere. Today, we count 22 different cell manufacturers around Europe that are in some either in operation, some in operation, but most of them in being built, and some of them in planning stage. So in that part of the value chain, the cell manufacturing, I would say we're definitely not producing a lot in Europe yet, but give it two years, and then you will see the volume starting picking up. Now, the European, back to what is EBA, European Battery Alliance, that's a group of some 600 companies, but it's also research institutes, banks, financiers, all kinds of people with money wanting to invest, and with the common goal to build this European battery industry. The reason why we have this mandate from the European Commission to do this is that InnoEnergy was instrumental in helping the European Commission to define how do we now catch up, how do we build an industry that doesn't exist, so that, and the purpose, let's be open about that, the purpose of doing this is, of course, to ensure that our car industry will survive now that everything is going electric. If the car industry in Europe has to rely on batteries from somewhere else, we're very vulnerable. That's the driver. And the driver for that, for electrifying, is, of course, as all of you know, that's the environmental problem. And the transport sector is the one of the biggest problems. As an introduction.
And just as a quick follow-up question, do you just look at battery metals investments inside Europe, or do you look beyond Europe?
We look beyond Europe, definitely. However, I will be totally honest that we are trying to get as much as possible of that supply into Europe. And I just bragged about the cell manufacturing part of the value chain now, in fact, picking up quite well. The part that is just like Matt said, like that has long times to get installed, is exactly the raw material part. We have engaged in several lithium projects in trying to help them to get permits, to get financing, and so on and so forth. But there are other minerals, other materials that we have to move on to. Lithium, I would say, there are some good projects out there, and I think that they will fly. But we also have to look at magnesium, at cobalt, at nickel, and so on, and graphite, not the least.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Jay, I know that battery metals is something that you've been evangelizing since I think I first met you back in 2014. If you had to pick out a couple of trends for 2021, what would they be?
Well, I think there's a few things that have been talked about already, but I'll try to sum it up by, first of all, with Matt. I totally agree. We've had this huge amount of capital that has been invested in applications in the midstream, and this we've been in sort of a bear market in prices for battery metals for a long time now. We're starting to see an upturn in prices right across the board. But I think it really has given the application and the investors and the makers of these cars and products a real sense of false security that the supply is going to be there. You mentioned Boss Johnson. Last year he came out and he jumped on board. All our politicians are jumping on board for no carbon footprint by 2050, but none of them talk about the raw materials that are required to get there. Just shortly after he made that statement, the British Ministry of Natural Resources came out and they published, and I don't know that I don't have the numbers in front of me, but essentially they said that the UK alone to meet their all electric by 2050 is going to require 3 times the current global supply of cobalt. And they went down the list, and it was just this magnificent market share that the UK alone would take out of the global supply. So I think there's a real issue here. I think batteries, the manufacturers need to be prepared for some continued price appreciation and potentially price spikes. I guess one of the bigger trends too, and I guess it's pandemic related in many ways, and perhaps others with the trade war between the United States and China, and as well environmental, is that we're really moving away from a global supply chain, and we're starting to see regional supply chains be set up, or sort of these regional hubs, and they're all competing against each other because they want a part of this market share, and nobody wants to be beholden or have a single point of failure in their supply chain. This was reiterated by Elon Musk on Battery Day, the last Battery Day that he held, wherefore in the United States, he's going to be looking to sourcing as much of the raw material that he can from North America for his mega factories in the United States. And, as we've already heard from others in Thore and Matt, we're seeing the same thing for Europe and Asia and Southeast Asia. And I think that's a significant trend. When considering investing, you have to perhaps start to look at, if you're looking at raw materials, start looking at those raw materials that might be in closer proximity to some of those manufacturing hubs. The other part of that is sort of the ESG component that is going to backstop this deglobalization of the supply chain. Elon Musk, again, to refer to him, talks about how, by having these regional hubs, we're really lowering the carbon footprint on a lot of these materials, so that we're not having raw material go from the DRC to China for processing, to Korea into a battery, and then the battery being sent to Elon Musk in the United States. To the point where I think that you will start to see in the near future where, and this goes across the board for commodities, I think that they'll have a environmental carbon footprint rating. And if they're in proximity and they have a low carbon footprint, they'll be priced at a certain rate. And if they're not, then they'll be priced with a tax, much like you see in the oil industry. So these sort of three themes, I guess, a price appreciation, deglobalization of the supply chain, ESG, I think kind of fit together in many regards, but it should and it would impact what you consider for your investment choices, I think.
Okay, thank you very, very much for that. I think that sort of like nicely sort of like leads into our opening sort of presentation. So thank you very much for that to our three investor guests, and then this now nicely moves on to our first mining update of the show. Bharat Parashar has over 42 years of experience in Asia and the United States in a variety of fields, including mining, private equity, and investment banking. He's currently chairman and chief executive officer for Ceylon Graphite Corporation, a company involved in the exploration and mining of graphite in Sri Lanka. He's also concurrently the managing partner for Clove Capital Partners LLC, a private investment firm. Over to you, Bharat.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome to all on the show here. We're a small company listed on the TSXV, and I can proudly say we are involved in the production and exploration of graphite in the idyllic island of Sri Lanka. And as BMI, who all of you know, the Benchmark Minerals have put it, we are the newest entrants to the Producers Club. Before Andrew did flash a disclaimer, and let's get on to it. Our mission is currently, as I say currently, and that's very important to understand, is to be a low-cost, low-impact global supplier of the highest quality graphite. And it has to be 100% trackable and transparent. And this we look at is to a rapidly growing energy storage market. I very strongly believe that, yes, electric vehicles are the first stage, but if the renewable energy policy of any government or anywhere else is to survive, the biggest weakness currently is storage. And storage is whatever you want to call it. It's all battery, battery, battery. And it's a battery of a different kind. And for batteries to succeed, you need graphite. As Mr. Elon Musk, since Jay and others defer to him, I will also mention Elon Musk. Elon Musk says these cells should be called nickel graphite because your cathode is really all nickel and your anode is graphite with a bit of silicon, and lithium is just sprinkled on it like salt on a salad. So, graphite's important. In our stage of our company, we're a new entrant to this business. We've only been around since 2017, and I think we've done a pretty outstanding job. Our mantra right now is simply production, production, production. We got to focus on production and build our production. As I'm sure a lot of you have seen, Matt talked about it a bit, about purity. We have the highest grade purity on the planet. We are 90+% in situ. Yes, it's a bit all over the place. Some of our graphite goes up to 96, 97%, but it's very pure. Unlike most of the jurisdictions, we have a cheaper cost footprint. It costs us about $2.5 million to build a mine, and it takes 2 to 3 years, including all the permitting, to build a mine. We are a little different model. Rather than have a large mine, we will have several small mines, and we expect each mine to have about fully ramped up production capacity of around 5,000 tons. And based on that, we have tried to develop. Andrew, if you could just go back a second, please. Yeah. We estimate the average mine life of most of our mines to be 50 years, and that's simply because there are 2 existing mines in Sri Lanka, Kahataga and Bogala, which was started in 1873. They're still going strong, and they're down at 2,200 feet. We're only at 150 to 200 feet in our mines. As I said earlier, we are in production with our K1 property. Our M1 property should be in production, God willing, by June, July. We've been battery grade certified by Dorfner and American Technologies. Our production costs are extremely good right now. It's about $200 to $220 a ton. We're a little different from the flake graphite producers in as much that we are vein graphite, and we don't have to go through all the numerous things like separation, flotation, concentration. We can effectively just use an electric saw or a jackhammer and pull out bricks of this stuff. And yes, there is flake on either side, but we'll look at that later in the game. We don't need to look at it right now. We break even with small production. And most importantly, as some of you have said, we bring diversity to the global supply chain. We're not from China, and we have better material, and we are located somewhere in the middle. We can supply to both Europe and to the United States with equal amount of the shipping lines. Pretty much go through Sri Lanka. Next slide, please. As I said, we're in production at our K1. We are very driven by the environmental issues in Sri Lanka. No open pit mining is allowed. We're all underground. I have some pictures here of our shaft, of the veins you see underground. Some of our veins are huge, more than 3 to 4 feet wide. All around us is a rubber plantation, and we try and keep that environmental and posture. We are also very involved in the neighborhood, in the villages around us, and as we build and expand, I hope that this becomes a real big part of our business. Next slide, please, Andrew. This is our M1 site. Little smaller right now in terms of we haven't reached production here, but in my opinion, this is going to be a mega project. In some of our old slides and on the web, you can see when we first saw this site, we found a surface vein that was 10 feet wide. I don't think anywhere in the world has anyone seen something like that. And as we've gone down on our first shaft, and this shaft, which you can see me standing at the bottom of, it's about 70 feet here. I'm stretching out my arms, and I'm a big guy. You know, I'm 6 feet plus, and my wingspan is over 6.5 feet. The vein is more than 6.5 feet, and it's going right down into the rock. Now, yes, I agree that this bulbs and pinches, but this is a good indication of what is available. And according to all my geologists, and I'm not one, we are on the Vani plate, which is the same plate as which Bogla and Kahataga are on. So there's a lot of historical evidence that this could go on forever. The other thing about it is I'm just waiting for my license here because that will allow me, the A license, to just barrel in straight into the reservoir. We can just build a tunnel straight in. And these shafts that we're putting in on the top, in the case of the M1, will purely become ventilation shafts. Next slide, please. But having said this, where are we going to be? We are not going to be a graphite producer. Yes, graphite and natural graphite will be part of our business, but we are going to convert into a technology company. And that's the only way we're going to be able to do this. It's basically commercialization of these technologies. It's just not developing a patent. It's being able to convert the patent and the technology into real application. And we have hired 2 top quality global scientists who've got over 30 patents amongst the 2 of them. They're a husband and wife team. They will create next generation graphene and graphite enhanced technologies for application. We're looking at a variety of products. We're looking at fuel graphene. We're looking at smarter paints and coatings. We're looking at the graphene to be sprinkled, as Elon Musk would put it, into the lithium-ion batteries. We're looking at flow batteries and composites for aerospace industry. This is just some of the things we're looking at today. But our plan, as I said to you, will be we're going to get to production. I am hoping we'll be able to get all the capital we need to be able to get to 50,000 tons per annum, which will make us a substantial player in about 4 to 5 years, and then convert through the building of a proper upgrading and processing plant to the next level. I do agree with what Matt said. It takes 2 years to qualify for some of these battery guys. But, my view is I'll agree with that point. I have a different perspective after that. If these guys want our battery material, they better learn to qualify us quicker, because graphite in today's world, highly fungible, can be used in a variety of products. And if the battery, the guys for EVs are just going to waste our time on a lot of this stuff, you're going to find a lot of producers moving away from this or going to plants who will take less time. It's really, right now, they just drive the process. Whereas I think it should be a collaborative process. And we got to move more onto that way forward. Next slide, please, Andrew. So just to wrap up here, and I'll be open to any questions. We are well positioned to grow shareholder value and to grow our company. Graphite for us is the new oil. It's going to be that as more and more as we go into the renewable business. We have extremely high grade natural graphite, and we're going to be, in 5 years, we're going to be at 50,000 tons. I know everybody says this, but I think we can justify this. We are the quickest and maybe to market. We can get a mine ready in 2.5 years for a very low cost, and our average production cost is just $200 to $220 a ton. We're product certified, and we're geographically well positioned. And the picture you see here is what we take out of the ground. I think those of you who've seen us at Mines and Minerals conferences usually see me with a big piece of graphite on the table. and that's the kind of stuff we take out when we mine, we bring it up, we crush it a bit, put it in black bags, and sell it. And one of the funniest things that's going on right now, and so all of you can know this, is the Chinese are on my case to buy raw graphite. And the simple reason is they want to buy our product to mix with their product to upgrade the value of their product, given that they have such third-rate material overall. But yes, it does all become the same when you purify it and process and process and process it and concentrate it up to the right levels. But in a raw state, they just want to improve their product. Having said that, I'm open to any questions you might have, or Andrew, whatever the program calls for.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. I think that what I'm going to do, actually, if it's okay with yourself, Bharat, I'm going to have the next presentation up first from Eric, and then what I'm going to then do, we'll then do some like joint Q&A, because it may be that some questions I ask Eric will also be relevant for like yourself, Bharat, and sort of like and also sort of like vice versa. So hopefully up on the screen now, we can go and see Eric's presentation. Just to briefly introduce him, Eric Desaulniers is President and CEO of Nouveau Monde Graphite. A big plug for Nouveau Monde Graphite. They won one of our mining pitch battles at Mines and Money December online event. And along with Ceylon Graphite are appearing at our upcoming March event on the 23rd to the 25th of March. Nouveau Monde's graphite tagline on its homepage is green battery materials to power the energy revolution. Over to you, Eric.
Great, thank you very much. And maybe you can go to the slide one. And while you go to the slide one, I totally agree with the comments of it takes time to build a mining operation. I founded the company in 2012. I think I met Jay at this hockey night in Hong Kong. So I knew he was on the panel. So I wanted to make sure he understand my allegiance. But, you know, I think it was in 2014, Jay, at the time.
Yep.
And we discovered a deposit in 2015 in Saint-Michel-des-Saints. And since 2015, we invested probably around 75 million to be at the level where we are today. And we received yesterday, actually, our mining permit to build the large-scale mine that we're working on. So, I mean, it's taking time, and we'll be in full-scale production in 2023. So if I go back a little bit, who we are, Nouveau Monde Graphite. Nouveau Monde Graphite, we are developing two projects. First, an all-electric open-pit mine in Saint-Michel-des-Saints, 2 hours north of Montreal. And second, the transformation plan for the flake graphite to be transformed in anode material, 2 hours northeast of Montreal in Bécancour. So it's the largest projected graphite operation in the Western world. We are planning to be fully carbon neutral, something super important especially in Europe, but becoming more and more important as well in the US. I was on a panel this morning in the US, and they were all talking about how much they want to catch up on Europe in terms of sustainability and on regulations. So guys, America is coming. So it is quite interesting. So what we are, and we didn't just make this up like last week. Like I decided in 2017, when we were doing the pre-feasibility study, that we would do something that is all electric, carbon neutral, and take advantage of the clean hydropower. And we will put in place all the initiative possible to make this project sustainable. Now we're lucky that it seems to be the right things to do for the customers. We are at the forefront for mining in terms of sustainability investment. And also, you know, when you talk to a car maker that suddenly today now they need to fill his tank full of minerals, and he needs to calculate his carbon footprint. Usually they don't have to talk to miners. Now they have. So they talk to a raw material company like us. We need to be perfect. Like they flip us upside down, life cycle analysis, sustainability rating. So we're super happy of everything we have developed. So maybe if we got the next slide, we'll go in Saint-Michel-des-Saints, which is 2 hours north of Montreal. So we're kind of very lucky to have access to a lot of infrastructure. So one of the cheapest hydropower in the world, access to skilled labor who are used to run industrial operations, mainly in the wood business. Now we're developing a mining business, is a new thing in this sector in Quebec. But as you can imagine, permitting in the Western world, it took us 5 years, over 10,000 pages exchanged with the Quebec government. So receiving a mining permit to build a 100,000 ton open pit, 7 kilometers from a community like that, it is something that is overlooked. It takes time because I don't know how long it takes, you know. So us actually in 2018, we started to operate what we call the stage 1. So we use an old plant, an old forestry plant. And since 2018, we have processed 525 tons of concentrate. So roughly 20,000 tons of ore were processed to make 525 tons of concentrate that we have sold to customer in the flake form. And since last year, we started to transform those flakes into spherical graphite, which is the other part of the process. So stage 1 is fully operational and we're still running it. Since yesterday, we are fully permitted to build the 100,000 ton project. And we will start all the construction activities now that we have the permit, and we'll be in full scale operation by 2023. We are supported by the probably top shareholders in the world. The Palingers Group, they own 20% of our shares. Quebec government, second largest shareholder, and Caisse de Dépôt, FTQ, so very strong shareholder who want to create value and build this project. So I mean, we are very well supported on that front. I don't want to go in all details on our resource and how great is our graphite. I mean, we have a very good resource, and that's the reason why we have a low cost projected operation, but also, you know, fully vertically integrated. So, I mean, you need to be low cost to compete with our friends in China. It's a market that is 100% controlled by China. This is totally not acceptable for the procurement department of all the OEMs in Europe and US. They cannot have a 100% controlled supply chain. So we need to compete on cost, but we want to be the second supplier of everyone of cost parity, but fully traceable, fully carbon neutral, vertically integrated in friendly Quebec province. So that's what we do in Saint-Michel-des-Saints. And maybe we can go in Bécancour now, the last slide. So when you transform graphite, you know, you cannot do that anywhere. I mean, you need to have, it's a high energy intensity process. So you need a lot of electricity. You need to have low cost electricity. In Quebec, we are around 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Unlimited, it's all hydropower. My ancestor invested in huge dam in Quebec, and we are in oversupply of energy, which is something very interesting for us. And so you need energy, you need to be close to your deposit to reduce the logistics and make it fully vertically integrated and low cost. So we are close to our deposit, obviously, which is low cost, very close. It's an hour and a half drive. And also you need to have the right chemicals to really develop something that is sustainable. So we have designed our project. We are in construction for the phase 1 as we speak. Within our supplier of chlorine, the largest producer of chlorine in the world is All-In. And they have a plant here in this industrial park in Bécancour. You see the St. Lawrence River at the end of the picture there. So we have selected this industrial park because it is the right place to build and grow and make a real transformation hub for raw materials. So we have there cheap electricity, cheap chemical supply, but we can also work with All-In to really recycle those chemicals. So we do the inverted reaction that they do. So, I mean, they produce chlorine and caustic soda. We raise high temperature in our furnaces. We inject chlorine and we use the caustic soda to do a brine that we give them back, and then we can make a lube that is truly sustainable. So that's why we're located there. So stage 1 is right in their facility. It took us 18 months to negotiate with them and go in all details of our process. How you know, you don't build a high temperature purification furnace in your garage. You need to make it in a facility that knows how to handle those chemicals and how to process this. So that's what we're doing in all in. And then we purchased already the land across the street, and we are currently designing our stage 2, which we are planning to start construction in 2022. So that's the land across the street from them, so we can do all the material handling through a pipeline. So that's the idea of being close to them. And you see the land there, it looks small on that picture, but it's 750 meter long. It's quite a big land, but that's what you need. You know, I've drove 2 summers ago from Galveston, Texas to Louisiana with the Tesla, with the family on holiday. And that's where you understand the scale that need to be built. I mean, it's one after the other refineries, and you drive for dozens of kilometers, hundreds of kilometers. And so when I went in the industrial park in Quebec, that's probably the only place in the Quebec province where we can think of building this transformation area. So we can receive graphite from our mine, obviously to be fully vertically integrated, but we can also receive graphite from anywhere in the world, thanks to the port and thanks to the other great things that we have there. So it's a great location. And maybe for you, Thore, I'm looking for such a site as well in Europe. So if you do have ideas where we could do that in Europe, we do have a lot of discussions with customers in Europe where localization is important. So yes, we can provide the flake from Saint-Michel-des-Saints, but if we can make a truly sustainable way to finish the work in Europe closer to the customer, there's 3 process steps that we can, try to use the energy, maybe hydro here, but do finalize the product in Europe. We have an office now in London. We have 2 very experienced people in London that are doing that, meeting with jurisdiction and see how we could implement a plant over there. But it's quite exciting year after year, and we're lucky. We're right timing, but we needed to start well in advance, design this project. And now, yesterday we received the permit, and during the investor call, I was telling my 3 engineers who are really focused at delivering this 100,000 ton a year mine, say, guys, now we need to work on the expansion plan already. We need to tap in all the resource we have on the deposit. So we need to go again, another 4 years of permitting if we want to do an expansion on the project and then build it. So, it takes 5-6 years to build those projects. So now we will be up and running mid-2023 with 100,000 ton, and we're starting to work on 2025 expansion. That's how mining is. So that's why now it's a bit of education to tell that to all the automakers and all the battery makers and even the investors.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think that I can invite everyone to go and post questions in the chat box for both Eric and also for Bharat as well. I'm going to ask the first question, which is going to be common for both presentations, but I'm going to pose it first of all to you, Eric. On your sales literature, you talk a lot about sustainability a lot. Specifically, how do you meet ESG investors' criteria?
This is a good question. I receive a lot of inbound from new funds, ESG funds, who never thought of investing in an open pit mine. Like, it was not in their prospectus description for their investor to invest in an open pit mine. But now they realize, the ESG investor, that we need to have mines to decarbonize our economy and make it live a greener life. So if we need to have mine, better investing in a mine that is carbon neutral, that do everything they can with the local community, so it benefits the most possible the local community on a lot of different initiatives, training, but also developing new expertise that could be exported once your resource is depleted, because we are, by definition, we are mining a resource that is non-renewable. So making it truly sustainable is quite a challenge, So yes, recycling, but so it's a challenge. But these ESG funds are designing their criteria as we speak to invest in projects like us, but they don't have criteria that are very well defined for investing in open pit mine, But they are there, they are talking to us, and it's quite interesting. Alongside the car makers as well. The car makers now, they need to understand what is sustainability, and they need to evaluate a mine sustainability, and and they need to see an alternative as well. The alternative is China. In China, they are trying to get greener every year, but it's quite a challenge with coal power and with the way they are decades behind us in terms of sustainability. So I mean, we're really well positioned, I think.
Okay, thank you for that.
Slowly but surely, I think the ESG funds and everybody in the world is realizing that we're not building a green economy without mining.
Yeah, definitely. And then just the same question to you, Bharat. What are Ceylon Graphite's green credentials?
Well, first of all, I think most importantly, we're an underground mine. So we're not destroying the environment around where we are mining. Like Eric said, we are also working closely with the communities around us. Sri Lanka is a little behind Canada in the economic development phase. And we are obviously having to put in a lot of infrastructure to where we mine. The picture you see behind me is a picture of our mine. And basically on top of where we exist is a rubber plantation. And we are not going to disturb that. Yes, we have created some roads and cleared some land for our work. But more or less, it's going to be in this stage through the life of the mine. And that has been the case with the other mines in Sri Lanka too. If you go to see Kahataga, it's a coconut plantation. The one point I'd like to make about how we will distinguish ourselves in the future too is one of the things we have said from the beginning is we will not be involved in any acid leaching. So far, most of the graphite refinement and processing that takes place in the world, even in parts of Europe and Japan, is done through acid leaching. Hydrofluoric acid is used to take out impurities from the graphite. We are looking at I wouldn't say proprietary technology, but a technology which is driven by heat and the thermally driven process. We're not going to be using chlorine, but we're using a different kind of gas. We're not yet completed with that, but it's going to provide the same sort of benefit that I think is currently provided, similar to Superior Graphite's plant out in America. But we are totally focused on this. There are lots of NGOs running around Sri Lanka trying to disrupt anything that they think is bad for the environment, but they are quite happy with us. And I think we hope we can continue to proceed in that vein.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd now like to bring in our investors. Jay, do you have any sort of questions for either Bharat or a question for Eric?
Well, I don't have any questions, but I noticed one of the questions in the chat there, Andrew, and I agree. Like they talk about raising the profile of graphite, and I think that graphite is, for the investors out there, it is an often overlooked component or element in the battery, probably next to manganese. Those two elements are so important, critically important. We're seeing the LCM battery gain more traction towards 811 in sort of the European and Western markets, maybe a lithium phosphate more in China these days. But in all of them, consistent would be the graphite and the anode component. Now, there will be some chatter out there with solid state batteries and how that's going to impact the anode, but it's also important to understand the battery, aside from a little bit of the chemistry changes that we'd see in the cathode, the lithium ion battery that we have today is pretty much here to stay for some time, 7 to 10 years, most likely. One reason is because it takes we talk about the lag time of mines. It takes a tremendous amount of time and testing to get to a commercially stable battery. And now also there's been billions and billions of dollars invested into these batteries and batteries chemistries. So something new would have to displace that investment. Elon Musk is not move, he does lithium ion for storage because he's trying to increase scale on lithium ion. He's not going to make a shift after investing billions of dollars into the chemistries that he's developed to the date with his partners. But I do think people need to pay more attention to graphite and what's going on. And I commend both these gentlemen, Bharat and Eric, because we talked about some of the trends, and they really are hitting the check boxes. Mining gets a bad reputation with anecdotal situations around the world, and it doesn't really truly reflect the hard work that's going in by Bharat and Eric to meet all their ESG, to know their market. They're both focusing on proximity to their customers, very aware of the community and all the check boxes that they need to hit. So well done, guys.
Thank you. I'm bringing in Torres. Torres, so I guess, do you have any kind of questions for Eric or a question for Bharat? Or are you able to help Eric out with his plans for a graphite production facility in Europe?
I don't think I can add something to what you're saying. You're, as Jay just said, there's a tick in every box. You're doing exactly what you need to do. So I'm truly impressed with that. And so why am I saying that? Well, in order to come to Europe, you have to do that. In December, the European Commission passed something called the EU battery regulation. It's in the process of being made right now, but it goes all the way down into your mines. So there's a reason why the OEMs will scrutinize you to the very last digit, that's for sure. And you're saying all the right things, so I'm not worried about that. One thing that might be in your advantage coming to Europe is our here being in Europe. I'm in Europe, especially in my end of Europe. Permitting is extremely difficult. You guys just said, I think I heard 5 or 6 or 7 years or something like that. That's very good. That's very fast. In Europe, it takes longer.
Okay.
And this could be, of course, I'm worried about this, of course. So in another context, I'm working with authorities, with the European Commission, with the member states on how to change this view on mining. And it is changing. Now you see investors wanting to put money into mining in Europe. That's been some time since that happened before. So things are definitely changing. And yes, so I think you could have an edge because you might be faster than the local. There are graphite here in several locations. There is graphite in Europe, but our time to get that into operations, there are some in the way north of Scandinavia. There are 2 mines, for example, and I'm sure you know of them, but they are smaller than what you guys are talking about. So I imagine that the costs would be higher than what you guys are talking about. That's one thing. And then Eric, you being in the United States, in America, I think from signals I'm getting from the battery industry in United States, you will have a lot to do with your neighbors. Only since this mess in United States started, now that they're finishing up that stuff, and I've gotten over the last 3 weeks, I think 6 or 7 different phone calls from organizations. I have no clue who they are, wanting to now catch up on the battery industry and hear how are we doing this in Europe? Seemingly for them, and I think it's true as well, Europe is in fact, we have done a lot of good work over the last 4 years, from having nothing to now having nobody doubts anymore that we will have a battery industry in Europe. And the Americans are drooling after to know, how did we do that? They want us to come to United States and do something like that. So at least you, Eric, being close to United States, I think you will have a lot of attention from your neighbors. That's one thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I think those are.
You see the advertisement during the Super Bowl that tells where the mood is. Huh? You see the GM advertisement and Volkswagen drinks. I mean,
Yes.
they're putting their we say in French, their trip on the table. Like they're
Yes.
like, we're doing this. All the OEMs, including Ford, including GM, they want to catch up on Tesla. So I think you're right. America is waking up.
Without the doubt, this tipping point that was predicted to happen in 2020, it happened, but it happened to a greater extent than what we anticipated. And now it's taking off more. Before, you would always talk about exotic Norway that had a lot of EVs and so on. Norway is not the big news anymore. Now it's Germany and France getting started, and they have much bigger volumes.
Let me give you
really
guys a bit of trivia here. Tesla Model S has 71 kilos of graphite in it. And the smallest car, which is the Volkswagen E, even that is about 28 kilos of graphite. And everything else is in the middle. So there's a huge, and this is just the EVs. America cannot go on, as Eric said, with these oil refineries. It has to go into renewables, and to go into the storage, which Mr. Musk also is trying to do with his big storage facilities. They need graphite, and it's funny nobody talks about that, but I'm sure over time that will begin to happen.
I'm sure you're right.
Can I ask a question to Matt specifically?
Yeah, sure.
Because me, what I'm worried on the graphite growth is because you cannot do a battery only with graphite. So you need you need all the materials to be supplied at the same time, at the same pace, or to make all those batteries. So at one point, one of the material will be the bottleneck, and it will limit all the other growth. You follow me? So
Which
you do your
is the bottleneck?
Yeah, did you do your estimation on this? Which one and how much it will impact on the growth? You know.
So I think all of the materials will be a bottleneck at one time or another. But for me, in the near term, I'm most worried about lithium. We've seen inventories falling in lithium in China over the last 2 to 3 months. We've seen Chinese lithium carbonate prices ramp up very, very rapidly. So we're seeing quite strong demand for lithium coming through from the industry, and very, very little supply response is possible realistically before the end of this year. So I think in the near term, it'll be lithium. In the longer term, I'm actually worried about all of the battery materials. And, you know, graphite's definitely in there. Nickel, I'm very, very worried about because it's such a capital intensive industry. And, you know, it takes a lot of time to develop a nickel project and permit a major nickel project. So nickel, I'm worried about. High purity and manganese, I'm worried about. Go on, Thore. Yeah,
no,
high purity
manganese. I was just
I'm very worried about.
Manganese. Cobalt, I'm not so worried about. That is being built out of batteries. So the Congo and all that, all those problems, I don't waste time on that. But manganese, nickel, because it's so there's only a few suppliers of it. That's actually, I'm starting to look beyond the lithium. There are quite a few activities on lithium right now, but we are overlooking manganese, nickel mainly, and graphite. There is a lot of graphite being produced, and you have synthetic and you have natural. So I think you have more options there, but manganese and nickel.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I'll go on.
I'd also add on to it though that, you know, the bottleneck for the investors that are tuning in is not just in the raw materials, but also in the chemical processing.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit earlier. So either one of those things can really, you know, slow down potential growth of the EV market. It's something, you know, it's the Achilles heel that they all got to be concerned about.
Yeah.
I agree. We're not seeing enough investment in cathode materials and also in anode materials. And I think Eric's project, the thermal purification project, is a particular sort of leader because it is a thermal purification rather than acid leach project. So it's much more friendly than a lot of the projects that are extant or operations that are extant in the world at the moment. And also you're benefiting from the low cost and friendly hydroelectric power in that. So I think that's, you know, that takes things to another level from the point of view of ESG, I think, in that project. I just want to make one point about the transparency or the recognition of the graphite industry. And I think it's difficult because historically graphite's been seen as an industrial material. And I think people are not really waking up to the fact that graphite is vital in the electric vehicles industry. And I think also there's an issue with the graphite industry because it's quite opaque. There's not an awful lot of information out there. And at the risk of dropping in a fairly humongous advert, I did actually write an investor's guide to graphite last year, which is available for free. So people who are interested in getting to the bottom of the graphite industry, you can download that off our website for free.
I think that Torres,
post your website in the chat there, Matt.
Okay. And I think that Torres, were you about to ask a question a few minutes ago or raise a point?
No, I was just going to say that on active materials, the step after raw materials, yes, that will be in the 1, 2, 3 years. I'm worried about that, but I'm more worried about the mining part, and that is coming back to something I've already said, because it takes so long time to get mining up and running again. The Umicore's, the BASF's, the suppliers of the active material, they have a shorter time to get their act together. It doesn't mean it's not a problem, but it will be a shorter problem than the mining problem, which will limit. I go so far as to say that the car industry will be limited. Will be what's the word in English? Limited because of the non-restricted by the availability of batteries. We tried to in all our studies we tried to make a simple statement that is easy to catch, and the vision that Bloomberg, that Benchmark Minerals, and a bunch of these different companies have, they say that there will be shortages in 2030. That's a statement that we've heard for some time now. And if you say that something will be a problem in 10 years, then you really don't know, honestly, because in 10 years you can fix it. But our calculations say that situation in 2030, that is going to happen 2025. That's our provision.
I'll raise you. I think it's coming in 2022 or 2023. And I think what's accelerated that trend is actually the European stimulus off the back of the pandemic, because it's really used the carrot approach on electric vehicles rather than the stick approach of the CO2 legislation. And I think it's actually accelerated demand for EVs. And I think, you know, as I said, I think the sales side is underestimating EV demand, and that then cascades all the way down the system. So, you know, it's not a surprise. I mean, it's made column inches in the last couple of days because Elon Musk said it, but there have actually been battery shortages in the system since the middle of last summer in Europe. And in fact, you could have much larger EV sales in Europe if there weren't such very significant battery shortages. So there are battery shortages all the way through the system at the moment now. And, you know, probably in 6 to 12 months, there'll be raw material shortages as well, which is really going to lead to a lot of price volatility. And I'm on record as saying that I think the rise in raw material price is the biggest threat to the EV story.
Absolutely. Price appreciation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it seems like we've all been yelling in the wind for the last 8 years. Nobody's listening.
We started the company in 2012, and the graphite price was to the roof. You remember? I mean, it was like 3,000 and over, and there was no reason for it. Imagine now there's a reason for it. There will be a huge coming in. The price will spike, and it will be unsustainable. Anyway, so we'll be there. I mean, timing.
At least you'll be producing graphite this time.
Yeah. I think we've just got about 5 to 10 minutes to go. I'm just going to take a couple of questions from the audience, and we'll have a closing poll. Question that came in earlier from Robert Schaefer to Parashar. Do the small mines of Ceylon graphite fit better with the communities of the operating areas in terms of employment, environmental footprint, etc., and other ESG considerations? Would a large-scale mine be disruptive in your operating area?
It's an interesting point. I haven't really looked into a large-scale mine in Sri Lanka simply because it would cost a lot more when you go underground. When you go underground, you can follow certain veins and you could go after certain parts of the business, but tunneling underground in the rock is hugely expensive to create mega mines out of one space. Plus, Sri Lanka, the way it operates is you have 1 square kilometer grids, and each person is given multiple grids, and the whole country has been broken out into grids. From my perspective, it is much better to build multiple small mines because we can focus on the high grade, high recovery parts of the business much easier than to go after one large mine and disrupt the country. The country is basically a small little place. You can drive from the north to the south, east to the west in one day, and there's a lot of small villages, and it isn't a highly industrialized country, so there's a lot of agricultural, there are a lot of agricultural properties out there. The rights you get in Sri Lanka are subterranean. You don't have the ability. If you started buying up land, it would just become an uneconomical business. So because we have subterranean rights, I think it's much easier to go with multiple smaller pieces than one mega mine.
Okay. And I think we also have like a live question from the audience. Hopefully I've got this right, that Daniel Fox Davis wants to ask a question live. So if we can ask my colleague Kelvin Johnson, if you can just Kelvin, if you can just unmute Daniel, and hopefully Daniel, I've got you live so you can ask your question live to the panel.
Sorry, I put up on the message there, but Matt, thank you very much. Your input was extremely enlightening, and it was actually just in the middle of it. I was just asking what your website was so we could get hold of that graphite report, but I see several of us put that in the chat, and Andrew finally to come back. But I suppose the question I have there then really is, how does this all sit in vis-a-vis the activity in the press around hydrogen as a potential alternative? And do you have a view of how that would eventually sort of displace? Because everything's been focused here around the battery metals and that's the storage. But I mean, there was Intelligent Energy made in London. Sorry, the camera's not here. That big push there, and they were talking about their solutions. And there's been other people then talking about the prospect of that. And it seems to be being caught up in this bandwagon. But do you have any views about whether that has any realistic chance of becoming a battery storage solution?
Shall I, Thore, do you want to take that? Shall I take that? I'll start, and then if you want to drop in. So for me, hydrogen, I don't see hydrogen as battery storage for electric cars, primarily because of issues with infrastructure. So infrastructure and storage of hydrogen. So I see hydrogen potentially as a storage model for large vehicles, potentially vehicles that are on fixed routes, like trains, etc., and potentially for industrial uses. But I don't really see it as a car storage medium. And the other thing about hydrogen is we do hear a lot about green hydrogen, but at the moment there's very little actual green hydrogen production. And realistically, we're probably 5 to 10 years out on green hydrogen, on large scale production of green hydrogen. And for hydrogen to work, it's got to be green. So, I think hydrogen has a future, but I think it's towards the end of this decade, the beginning of the next decade. and batteries have the potential to really push ahead in the market ahead of that future. Thore, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I agree entirely with what you're saying. First of all, hydrogen and batteries, many people think that they're competing. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think that this is true. I think both will exist. On cars, there are some experiments about using hydrogen with fuel cells and so on. Those cars turn out much more expensive to produce than a simple battery car. A battery car, if you have the battery, that is half the price of a fuel, half the cost of making a normal car with a fossil fueled engine. So I'm not concerned that there will be a competition there. There are some truck manufacturers that are actually even larger vehicles dismissing now the using hydrogen. But if you go to trains, if you go to ships, maybe on airplanes, I don't know, then maybe hydrogen could be useful. Also, hydrogen, if as an island application, then I believe in it. But the efficiency, if you put it in parallel with charging a battery, using the battery for an electric motor, or burning hydrogen, the efficiency of using hydrogen is much lower.
If I can just add, and I'm not a scientist like these other two gentlemen, but what you're going to see is more and more development of the silicon wrap on the battery, on the graphite. Because as you know, all the problems that we've had in the past have been with the expanding silicon and batteries catching fire. This is where I think, and with a little bit of mixture, God willing, one of these days with the graphene, we're going to see the battery efficiencies improve dramatically, just like we've seen the improvement in the efficiencies of solar panels from about 18%, 20% a couple of years ago to close to 45, 50% right now. So it's just going to, development will take over more and more on the efficiency of the battery than to substitute it, I think, in the short run, 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah,
maybe I tend to be a little bit more optimistic. I think hydrogen will play a role. Though like Matt said, I think it's a little bit farther out than it's closer than batteries are here now. Hydrogen's got a little ways to go. But if you look at Japan, Japan appears to be betting more on hydrogen than they are batteries. It was going to be a big highlight for them during the Olympics to showcase a lot of their technology and transportation around hydrogen. But I think it will be application driven, and I think it will even be geography driven, market driven.
Yeah, maybe I can also add our all electric mines that we're working on since 2017. We are looking at both options, like hydrogen fuel cell powered mining site and battery powered mining site. There's in both as much graphite per kilowatt hour, so it doesn't matter me at all. But and on our site, we do have access to green hydrogen thanks to Air Liquide in Bécancour, like across the street from our value-added plant. Air Liquide is building one of the biggest electrolysis cells to produce green hydrogen. And we're getting very good at understanding where the trade-off is. When you get bigger and you have a big mining truck and you see Anglo-American building with Ballard, a fuel cell powered truck because it's 240 tonner. So it's a huge truck. You cannot make a huge battery like that. And battery are not flexible because the capacity of the battery goes with the power. You need to make it bigger and smaller. And the fuel cell, you can make the right power for your fuel cell, and you increase your hydrogen reservoir if you want more capacity. So it's more flexible and you don't need to change it. So the cost for us, we have 60 tonners and we are exactly on the trade-off, like battery powered and hydrogen powered are even. But the excavator at the bottom of the pit, because we don't want to run big cable, at the bottom of the pit, it's better fuel cell powered. And we're working with a few OEMs that I won't name here. We have NDAs with them, but huge OEM with Ballard making a fuel cell powered excavator at the bottom of the pit. So it's a flexibility. You need to see what is your specific application, and both will have a win. But I agree with you that hydrogen will be more niche application, like ferry stuff where you can fix your reservoir right there, and you can have an electrolysis cell there, and all the fleet need to come back at the same point. It will be easier, but both will have a niche.
Yeah, there's place for both, definitely.
Yep.
Okay. And I think that on that positive note, I think that brings us to the end of this week's show. So once again, I'd like to give a huge thanks to our guests, Jay Roberge, Thore Sekkenes, Matt Fernley, Eric Desaulniers, and Bharat Parashar. Also thanks to you, the audience. Thanks to our sponsors, Nouveau Monde Graphite, Ceylon Graphite, as well as the Resource Global Network. See you next week. Until then, stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye.